Okay, so in the last part of the lesson we saw how to pave some surfaces using our pave commands. We used our gems between two curves command and our scaled and uniform arrays. Okay, and then we placed some prongs on our gemstones to set them in place. We looked at the uniform and scaled prongs and also the 4-prong settings. Okay, after this we used our pilot cutter to cut away material beneath our stone so it has somewhere to sit. Okay, in this part of the lesson we're going to apply what we've learned to create a ring. We're going to pave a ring. So let's create a new file. We're going to use the basic closed solitaire ring template. Let's name our part. Okay, so we're in our new part with our template history, and we'll start off by bringing in a ring shank from the Counter Design Studio. Okay, so we're going to use a closed ring shank again. Left click to bring up the carousel of ring shanks. Let's pick a ring shank to use. Okay, I'm going to use the 5-sided comfort fit. Place it on our top datum, confirm the operation, and there is our ring shank. Okay, we're going to make some modifications to the parameters of this ring shank. We're going to come into the Tools Cutters tab, use our tweak command, pick our ring shank, activate it by left clicking on the name, and now we can make some changes to the dimensions. Okay, now one thing I should point out is our ring size here is not linked up to the ring size of the template. Okay, as you can see, our template has not changed size when we change the ring size of this component. Okay, this is because they're separate. This ring shank is a component, it has not been created on this template. Okay, so we cannot use our ring sizer on an imported ring shank like this. Okay, so let's redefine our tweak. Okay, let's bring it back down to a 17.3. Okay, and I'm going to change my top thickness, I'm going to bring it down a bit, 2.25. I also want to make this top surface a bit wider. It's this one here, say 3. Top side wall, this wall here, I'm going to bring it down to a 1. Okay, at the bottom, let's make our thickness, bring it down a bit, 1.5. Okay, we have a width of 2.75. I want to increase this surface width, let's say 2. Apply, confirm. Okay, so here is our modified ring shank. We can always come in and make more tweaks and modifications to it at a later time. Okay, by coming back in the history and modifying our tweak command. Okay, now I want to add a pave to this ring shank. I want to have gemstones going around my ring. Okay, but prior to performing a pave, we need to merge our shape. Okay, shape ribbon tab, merge, you may see it underneath the inlay command, merge, pick our ring shank as a base. Okay, and this is now a shape. So we're going to come into our pave tab and we're going to use the gems between two curves. Okay, we have two edges here that we can pave between. So we select this command, we can pick our gemstone type, let's say blue diamond, pick our first curve, okay, our first curve, this edge, pick our second curve, it's this edge here. Remember, try to pick them opposite one another. Our surface, it's this surface here. So we're seeing a preview here of some gemstones. We want to increase our number. Okay, and we want to spread them out. Okay, I'm going to bring my oversize. I'm going to bring them down in size a little bit. Change my step size to 100th of a millimeter. Let's change the oversize. Okay, I just want to reduce them slightly. Okay, you can see here how our pave is scaled according to the face and the curves. Okay, so we have a 1.94 millimeter gemstone at the bottom here. At the top, 2.87 millimeter gemstone. Okay, and let's add a slight elevation as well. 1/10 of a millimeter. Okay, let's confirm the operation. And there are our gemstones paved on our ring shank. We'll save our work. Okay, next step is to add our prongs. Okay, I'm going to deactivate the JCD datums. And now let's place some prongs. We come into our gems and settings tab. We're going to use the scaled prongs because our stones are different sizes. Okay, we get an error in the output. We can ignore this. We're going to pick our stones as a feature. Okay, we could also pick them from within our history. The gems between two curves. Okay, if we left click on this, it's going to pick all of the stones in that operation. Okay. Now we're getting some prongs at the bottom here, but not at the top. So let's play around with our settings. Let's change our overlap to around 20. Okay. Our overlap is how much our prongs overlap with the stone. Okay, if we're creating this piece for rendering purposes, we will want a small overlap. Okay, maybe 15%. But if we wish to manufacture this product, we're going to want to increase the overlap of our prongs. We want our prongs to overlap our stone more so that our prongs have a nice tight fitting when we come to set our stones. Okay, so for rendering purposes we want as small amount of material as possible encroaching upon our stones. Okay, so I'm going to leave that 20% here. I think the height is fine for now, we can always tweak it later. And now I want to play around with the distance. Okay, in fact the distance between my prongs seems just about right. Let's confirm the operation. We're taking into our tweak. Left click on the prong master to activate it. Okay, and we get a list of all of our prong sizes here, diameters. Okay, we can check them through here. Okay, they all seem to be an appropriate size. We don't really want to see anything below 0.3 of a millimeter. That wouldn't be good for manufacture. Okay, and we can change the height of our prongs if we wish to. Again, for manufacturing purposes, we may wish to have our prongs slightly higher, give them an increased height so we have extra material to work with. If we're rendering this design, we want to keep our prong height low. Okay, so there's differences when we're producing a design for manufacture or for rendering purposes. But I'm going to confirm the operation now, and there we have our prongs and our stones. Next up, we're going to add the cutters. Okay, I'm going to merge my prongs after I've merged my cutters so that the cutters do not take away material from my prongs. Okay, so let's create our cutters. I'm going to use the pilot cutter again. Pick the feature, it's our stones. Okay, let the software load, it might take a bit of time. Left click when you see the preview where you want it. Okay, we're going to leave this slight elevation there. Okay, we can choose to scale our stones, our cutters. This is going to scale them down in size or up in size. Okay, but I'm going to leave my scale at 1. There may be times that we want to change the scale of our cutters. Could help our prongs merge if we're having issues with them. Confirm the operation. Okay, let's activate in the tweak tool our pilot cutters. Okay, I'm going to decrease my girdle thickness. In fact, I'm not going to do that, but I'll navigate into a wireframe display mode. Okay, and here we get in a view of our gemstone. That's the blue wireframe, and our cutter here. Now we want our cutter, the pavilion, to come down to exceed that of the stone. And this is for in terms of rendering. Okay, again, if we're going to manufacture this piece, we may not want to take out so much material. Okay, so the stone setter might want a bit of extra material at the bench so that he has control of how much he takes out. You could use a drill or burr to take out the material to get a good fit for the stones he has on hand. Okay, but in this case, I'm going to be rendering this ring. I won't be taking it to manufacture, so let's bring our cutter pavilion down. Okay, let's drop it down. We'll start with 0.2 of a millimeter more. Okay, so that is not nearly enough. We're going to increase this. Let's say negative 1.25. Okay, so that just about does it perfect. Now bear in mind, whenever we are making modifications to our cutters, you have to remember that they are here for the purpose of removing material from our shape. So any changes we make here to the top side of our cutter are going to have no effect on the removal with our shape. Okay, so let's confirm this operation. Give it time to load. And now I'm going to merge these cutters. Okay, using our merge cutters tool. This is going to merge our cutters and then combine remove them from our ring shank all in one go. Okay, so we can pick our cutters. It's easy enough, it's just a feature. But I'll show you how our filter is effective. We can window pick the whole screen, and our filter is going to filter out only the cutters and use these to combine remove with our base. Okay, so let's blank out a gemstone and see if the cutters have done their job. Okay, and they have. They've removed material from our ring shank. So now all that is left to do is to merge our prongs. Come into our Gems and Settings tab, use the Merge Prongs command. Okay, we can do our same window pick. It's going to filter the prongs, the base. This is our base, the ring shank. Okay, and this is going to combine add our prongs. So let's see if this has worked. Here we have our complete shape, and we have our stones. So let's change our color. Okay, now we can come into our tools. We can inquire about individual stones. We can inquire about our metal. If we were to say set it to silver. Okay, and we can perform our bill of materials. We have our shape. Here, let's assign a metal to this shape. Say you want to a silver ring. Okay, so our shape is in the top, and all of our stones are already assigned their attributes. They're all blue diamonds, and we can see them in our lower table. Okay, we can generate our bill of materials, see it as a document. Again, this gives us the information we need to know about our design. We have a series of blue diamonds of varying dimension and carat weight, and we have a single silver band, 4 grams. Okay, so this is our paved ring shank. Save our work, perform a quick render. Okay, and you can see here that our stones are not rendering. Okay, so if you ever come in to use the live render and you find that something isn't rendering properly, you're missing it from the display, save your work, then regenerate the history. Okay, the reason we save our work is in case the program crashes, we want to make sure we have that saved backup. So regenerate, you may have to click twice. We respond yes to this overwrite for the ring shank. Okay, so you can see a regeneration takes a bit more time. Now we're adding lots of components into our history. Let's change our color again. Let's see if the live render works. Okay, so it's picking up our stones this time. What we needed to do was regenerate our history. Okay, so we could add our live rendering studio and play around with our face attributes to improve our live render. But I'm going to move on from here and create another paved band. But this time I want to create my pave within a channel in the ring. Okay, so I'm going to exit out into my root object. Okay, you can see here all of the different components that we have in that design. And here is our assembly. I'm going to create a new part. I'm going to use my basic closed solitaire, and the part name, let's call it channel pave ring. Okay, so this time instead of using my counter design studio to create a ring shank, I'm going to make one using our ring shank sketches and then perform a drive curve loft around the template. This way it will be linked up to our ring sizer. Okay, so let's do that. We'll use the 5-sided with a comfort fit. Confirm. Okay, now we're going to dimension it. Set our entity filter onto dimension. Right click, modify value. I'm going to put the delay solve on. Full. Okay, so this is going to delay the regeneration of our history. Okay, when we do this you can see that our history is outdated. Okay, and that our dimension is in brackets. This means that it is not resolved yet. Okay, so let's change a few more of our dimensions. Okay, I'm going to take the delay solve off. Okay, and it will all update. I'm going to bring this down a little bit more. Okay, we can move on to the bottom now. Right click, modify, 2.5. Okay, and I forgot to take the delay solve off, so we can simply come in and manually regenerate our history. Okay, there, and it updates. Okay, I might even drop this down a little bit more. Okay, so we have our ring shank sketches. Let's perform a drive curve loft. driving curve, we'll pick it as the template curve list. Our profiles, our sketches, picking them at the same points. No end caps, we will not keep the curves, confirm the operation, and there is our ring shank. Save our work. Let's look in our history. Okay, now let's see when we use our ring sizer how the ring shank will update with a change in ring size, like so. Okay, so this is what we want. Okay, so now we want to create a channel for our gemstones to sit in. Okay, and I don't want this channel to go all the way around the ring. Okay, I want this channel to come maybe to around the 2 o'clock position to the 10 o'clock position. Between those two, 10 to 2. So there's various ways we can create a channel like this. Okay, we saw in a previous lesson how I created a sketch, wrapped that sketch onto the ring shank, and then inlaid it to create the channel. Okay, but I'm going to use a different method this time. I'll come into my wireframe tab. I'm going to use my offset command. I'm going to offset on a face and edge. Okay, so I'm going to offset this edge on this face, and I want to offset it negative 0.5. Confirm. Okay, so let's offset this edge on this face by 0.5 millimeters all the way around. Okay, let's do this to the other side. Pick the edge, pick the face. This time it is a positive 0.5. Enter to lock it in. There's our preview. Confirm. There's our offset curve. Okay, so we're going to use this to create the outline that we're going to inlay. Okay, so the next step is to create curves across here. Okay, so I could come in, create a line, project it to the face. I could create curve on face through points. Okay, there's all kinds of methods. But I'm going to take a slightly different approach this time. I'm going to insert a sketch on my front datum plane. Okay, I'm going to create a line going straight up with a vertical constraint. I'm going to create another 2-point line, snap to the origin. I'm going to bring it out a distance, confirm. Okay, let's toggle this. This is construction geometry. And now I'm going to add a dimension, an angle dimension constraint between these two lines. Right click, use my quick dimension tool, pick the first line, second line. Here we can drag out the text anywhere. Left click to place it, and now we can dimension this line with respect to the 12 o'clock exactly. So let's set it at say 55. Okay, now I'm going to mirror this line across the y-axis so we have the same on the other side. Now there's a slight glitch in the software, and that is we do not mirror our constraint to the origin. Okay, so this mirrored line is not constrained to the origin, so when we change our dimension you can see it is being thrown off. Okay, so we have to add in this constraint manually. Let's throw it off. Okay, and to add in that constraint to the origin, okay, there's several things we can do. We can actually drag it to that point, but a better way to do this is use our point coincident constraint. Okay, so point coincident. We pick first point, second point we want to constrain it to, confirm, and that is constrain that point, that endpoint to the origin. Okay, so when we modify our dimensions now, okay, they're updating nicely together. Okay, so that issue with the mirror, that's likely to be solved in a later release or update for the software. But if you do encounter that issue, there is the workaround. Okay, and I'm going to add a dimension constraint to these just so they don't wander around so much. Let's say 20 millimeters. Okay. Okay, so these are the same. These lines they've got the same lengths. They're mirrored. They have their mirror constraints. So what I do to one, I will do to the other. Again, the length of these lines doesn't matter too much. I'm simply using it as an extrude. I'm going to extrude it and then use the intersection point with our ring shank. So let me show you what I mean. Extrude. Set my entity filter onto sketch. The profile is a sketch. I'm going to do a symmetrical extrusion. The endpoint doesn't matter, let's just bring it out a certain distance. As a base, confirm. Okay, now I want to draw a line where this face intersects with this face. So I come into my wireframe tab, using the interx curve, the intersection curve. Okay, it's in this bunch of commands, and we use them all the time. Okay, so my first shape is going to be the face, this face. My second shape, instead of being this face, I'm going to pick the extrusion as a shape, so I can do both sides at once. Confirm the operation. Now I can erase this shape. I've used it, it's done its job, and there you can see our intersection curve. Okay, and you can see now that we're building up the shape for our inlay for our channel. Okay, so now I need to trim these curves, okay, to the corner. Okay, and there's multiple trim tools we can use to do this. I'm simply going to use my one-touch trim tool. Okay, now we can simply come in and start trimming away like this. Okay, seems easy enough. However, this is not the correct method if we wish to change our design at a later stage. If we want to come in and edit it, you will see that this picking method, this trimming method, is not quite right. And we'll see what I mean by that. So we could inlay this combination of curves. In fact, let's do that. Going to inlay, so under merge, inlay on this face. Let's do a chain pick of these curves. Hold down the shift button, left click, give them an offset of negative 0.5. Again, we've got a nice inlay there. Okay, now let's come back in our history prior to the inlay. Okay, so how about we want to come to the history and change how far down this channel comes. Okay, so we can do this. Right click on our sketch. Let's edit it as opposed to modifying it so we can see the rest of the history played out. Let's change this, let's increase it, say to 60 degrees. Okay, when we exit the sketch, the rest of history will replay, or not. We may have to come in and do it manually. Okay, we've done it manually, and here you see our trim. Something has gone wrong with our trim. Okay, and let's go back in history and see why our trim is not working. We play through it. It seems like we're trimming out the wrong part. Okay, and the reason this is happening is because we picked a random point. We didn't pick an exact point, we picked a point on the curve to trim to. Now, before, this point was below this line, so it trimmed out fine. Since we changed our sketch and brought this line down, this point is now above there, and it's going to trim out the wrong part of the curve. Okay, so for this trim to work out supposed to, we need to change that pick point to here. I'm just dragging it down there. left click, and that trim has worked now. That's how it's supposed to work. Okay, but if we were to say change this angle again, bring it down further, that pick will be in the wrong place. It won't work properly. So the way we do this to ensure that if we make changes our trims do not get thrown off, we use our input options. Our right click input options, we use the along input option. We want to pick a point along this curve, pick our curve. Okay, I've got my entity filter set to edge, pick the curve, okay, and here's our point. 50%. Okay, so even if we change our ring size, that picked point is going to be there. So we'll always be doing that one touch trim at that point. Okay, so even if we change our sketch again and bring this down all the way to here, it's still going to work because our pick point is right at the bottom. Okay, so this is how we should do our designing, so that when we come in to make modifications to our design, we aren't throwing off the rest of history. But in this case, say we change the offset, we brought the offset in a bit, our pick point is going to be on the wrong side. So we again use our along here, and let's just go along an insignificant distance, 0.1 millimeters. I mean 0.1% of this line. Okay, it's going to be right here. So it's always going to be the right side of that line that we're using to trim. Okay, so for this one, use our along this curve. Okay, we don't want it to be 0.1%. We want it to be 50% again. Okay, right at the bottom. Okay, so I hope this is making sense. Okay, it's a bit more tedious, does take longer, but it saves time in the long run, because when we make changes we don't have to come in and redo these operations. Okay, so it may seem tedious now, but it is majorly beneficial in the long run. Save our work. Okay, so when we make modifications to our sketch, we could change this to be any value now. We could always bring it all the way down here. Okay, and our trim is still going to work nicely because we have used those input options to pick exact points. So I'm going to undo that. I'll bring it back to the 55 that we started with. Okay, now we can inlay this shape. We can inlay this collection of curves. In fact, we already did it in our history. Let's see if it will play out. Okay, and it does. Now let's do our pave. Gems between two curves. Edge. Now you see here we have two edges. Okay, we do not have one complete edge. Okay, we need one complete edge to do our pave. So we exit out of here, and we have an easy get around for this. Okay, because we can pick two edges. Okay, we have an easy get around from this. We come into the wireframe, use our curve from edge command, pick our edges. Okay, and this is going to create a curve on those edges. Let's redefine that. We'll change the color so we can see them. Okay, so there are our curves on those edges. Now these curves are still in two parts. 1, 2. You can't see it. How about we just blank out this shape? Here we go. So our curves are still in two parts and we need them to be one. We use our concatenate tool. Okay, now they should be tangent already because those edges were tangent at their meeting point. Confirm. Here we go, we've concatenated our two curves into one curve. Middle click, bring up the last operation, do the same for this side. There you go, we have a complete curve now. Unblank all. Let's come back into our pave, gems between two curves. Let's say we're going to use emeralds this time. Pick curve A. Do not want to pick the edge, we want to pick that curve. Okay, so here we go, we have the complete curve. Second curve. Surface. Let's increase our number. Spread out our stones. We need to bring them down a bit. Say negative 0.1. Okay, I want to give them an elevation. They're currently sitting pretty low in that channel right now. Let's bring them up 0.25. Okay, maybe even a little more, 0.3. Okay, so here's our gems between two curves pave. Now, what I like to do is increase this number to many more than I have there now, say 30, so that if I am to change my sketch again, for example, or other dimensions, say I change my sketch so the channel comes down to here again, I want my gems to automatically fill up that space. Okay, if we left this at the exact number of gems we have now, 8, we will only have 8 gems on that surface, that bigger channel. So we keep that number high so that our history is going to update and not need us to come in. So even our stones out. Okay, I'm going to confirm the operation. Here we go, we have our pave in our channel. Okay, let's play around with that sketch and see what I was talking about. Right click on the sketch, edit. I'm going to increase this value, let's say 65, in fact 70. Now it seems a bit tedious coming to our sketch to modify this value every time, and what we can do is assign a variable to this value. Okay, and then we can use our attributes, our driving parameters, to make changes to that number without going into the sketch. Okay, and we will see how we can do this in the future. Okay, it's very useful. We saw how we can make changes to our components using the attributes within the component history. Well, we can add these attributes to our current build to make changes in the same way. Okay, so let's regenerate this. Our channel is going to increase in size, and our stones have filled up the space because we had a larger number in our number of stones. Okay, so this is how we are building so that we can customize. Okay, so each operation we must perform keeping in mind the idea of customization at a later point. Okay, so now let's add in our prongs and then our cutters. Okay, so we're going to do this in all the same way. First of all, our prongs. Let's use the scaled prongs. Pick our stones. Okay, we're going to bring the overlap down. We're going to be rendering this piece. Maybe I want to make it 25%. Yeah, that looks fine to me. Okay, maybe we'll bring out the separation slightly. Just so we can have slightly bigger prongs. Confirm the operation. Okay, we're rendering this so that height is fine. You could even make them a little lower. I'm not going to tweak them. Okay, so now we need to add our end prongs. Remember, we come into our tools, cutters tab. We can use our component replicate. Okay, of course we could place manual prongs, but I like to use this one, it's a little faster. We use our component replicate to replicate a component that we like already. Just drop it in. Okay, so this overlap is a bit more, too much for manufacturing purposes, but we're just rendering this, so we'll leave it at that. Confirm the operation. Now if we don't like the position of component, we can use our component move. Okay, it's another tool where we can move our components dynamically. Okay, so this will do for now. I'm going to erase those curves, the pink curves. Okay, so I'm not going to do a window pick because there's curves on my template that I don't want to erase. So let's use our attributes filter. We're going to include only pink curves, window pick, erase, and that has erased those two curves only. Okay, let's use our pilot cutter, pick our stones. Okay, the elevation, I'm going to drop it down to 0. We have an elevation on our stones already. Switch to a wireframe mode. Okay, we can see that our pavilion, we need to bring that down. Okay, that's given us plenty of extra move material, so this will render nicely. Okay, remember we'll do it differently if we're going to manufacture it. Confirm the operation. Let's merge our cutters. Okay, and now let's merge our prongs. Let's see how it's worked. Blank it out. Swap entity visibility. There we have all of our cut material. Our stones can sit in there nicely. Swap entity visibility. Unblank all. Okay, we can change the color here. Let's save our work. Okay, and let's see if we can play around with our parameters. First of all, let's change our ring size. Okay, now the only issue we may have when we're changing our parameters is these end prongs, okay, because we place these at exact points that's not likely going to update so well. Let's see what happens. Okay, we're currently on a 7, let's bring it up to a 9. Okay, it's actually worked fine. Change color of the shape. Let's add a live rendering studio. Let's merge it as a base. Move this one down a bit. We'll move this up and out of the way a little. Okay, we want to make sure that it's still angled towards our ring. Okay, let's see how this looks with a quick live render. Okay, so this is the issue we've seen before. Okay, so if your live render is not performing correctly, you're not getting an image when you perform the live render, we save our work, then we regenerate the history, update our colors again, try out the live render, and this time it should work fine.